Can space exploration be a new form of capitalism? What about asteroid mining, space tourism, land ownership on Mars? These are thought-provoking questions that need to be explored and answered as space exploration takes off. My guest today will dig deep into this and give you some thought-provoking answers. Welcome to the Tenpenny Files, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. If it matters to your body, your freedom, or your future, we talk about it here. There's something new every day for someone. So please join us daily. We talk about food, fitness, farming, astronomy, agriculture, pets, politics, history, and of course, vaccines, health, and health policy. Once a week, I talk to a pastor or an author who writes about biblical principles. Join me here every day, Monday through Friday, at the Tenpenny Files to hear from voices who've often been ignored, silenced, or censored. Before we begin today, I'm asking you to please go to primembership.drtenpenny.com at the end of this interview, primembership.drtenpenny.com. Read about our membership, and hopefully you will support our work by joining. And one last thing, thank you to all of our regular followers and to those who have just found us. So now let's get started. Today's conversation is with historian, sociologist, world-renowned author, successful businessman and real estate investor, Dr. Rainer Zitelmann, to talk about his most recent book, New Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars, the book that makes it possible to understand the interplay between public and private space flight. Rainer, welcome back to the Tenpenny Files. It's so good to see you again. I had you on about your last book, Defense of Capitalism, and I tracked you down again to do your latest book. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me.
You know, I read all of your book. You know, I told you before we started this broadcast, I'm reading like 5 books a week, usually just sort of skimming, and I get the idea what the book is about. And a few books really take me deep, and I'm just so enthralled. I read all of it, and this book was one of them. It is so incredibly detailed and well written and just so interesting. I really couldn't put it down. I'm like a fangirl about your book here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm proud about it.
You know, in the foreword of your book, Newt Gingrich says, quote, the United States should adopt a policy of 100% write-off for manufacturing and tourism in space and no taxes for 40 years on profits from manufacturing and space tourism. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, why do you think that's a good idea?
Yes, low taxes is always a good idea. There should be lower taxes for each and everyone. Yes, because the government spends so much money for so much nonsense, and so. But of course, for space travel, I think even more important than the question with the taxes is the question of property. But I think property rights, I think we would later talk about it, because without property rights, no economic system works on Earth. And what does not work on Earth, why should I work in space or on the moon or on asteroids? But I think later we will talk about property rights.
Yeah, we will. I've got a lot of questions about that. You know, over the course of years since the first moon flight, that I have some questions about that. Presidents have waxed and waned about space exploration. Some have been for it and some have not. But Obama's disinterest in the state program paved the way for more space exploration. Do you think that Obama was really in the current history the one who pushed this forward, or did he inhibit it?
Yeah, because he wasn't interested in this. He was zero interested in space. And Obama does not like capitalism, does not like space. But this is good news, because when politicians are not interested in a topic, it's the best that can happen. And it was the case this way. He wanted to spend all his money for this Obamacare, for social welfare. And in his time, he spent 100 times more for social welfare as for space flight. And he wasn't interested in this. And then there were some smart people, private entrepreneurs, who told him, maybe it's a good idea if private companies do it. Oh, yes, that's okay. That's a good idea. Do it. So because he was not interested. And you see it also in my book, I have this story about the failure of manned spaceflight. But I don't write so much about unmanned spaceflight. And this was, in a way, more successful, and only because of one reason, because politicians were not interested in this. Every politician, every president was interested in a way in manned spaceflight. Go to moon, go to Mars, go to asteroids, build the space station, all new ideas with every president. But unmanned spaceflight, they were not so interested. And this was the reason why it was much more successful, because engineers and scientists were in charge to make decisions and not politicians. So sometimes, and I think this is not only true for space, it's true for a lot of things. If politicians are not interested in a topic, if they are not involved, then it's much better. I'm a Ronald Reagan fan, and I think you know this sentence. What he said one time: the worst words in English language, or the 12 worst words in English languages. I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help you.
Exactly.
I think he was right.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, yeah. It makes you want to slam the door and run, right? That's really true. Speaking of presidents, the first moon landing recorded was that after the first moon landing, what steps did Nixon take to shut down the space program to make sure that he even said this, that man doesn't set foot on the moon for the rest of this century? Why was he so adamantly against space exploration?
Yes, this was Nixon, and I have a lot about Nixon in my book. First of all, as a lot of politicians, but maybe for him it was even more, for him the polls were very, and this time after the moon landing, according to the polls, the majority of Americans were not so interested in this topic. And Nixon, of course, also he was not interested in it. He knew after the end of the Apollo program, so after the moon landing, the state should go on doing something in space. But what was not so important for him? If I went very deep in this decision-making process, and he was interested, for example, in building new jobs. California at this time was a swing state, and he won the elections. And of course, he wanted to win the next time. But there were, in the aerospace industry, people without jobs. And so for him, this with jobs, it has priority. What to do in space, he was not interested in all. But do something that creates jobs, because this is important for getting re-elected in this swing state. This was his decision. And the other thing that was important for him, they decided, we will talk more about this, the space shuttle. And a friend of Nixon, the founder of the company Rockwell, he was a close friend and also a close donor for his campaign for Nixon. And he wanted to build the space shuttle. So you see, all this decision process, what to do after Apollo, it was not very rational. It was about how to be re-elected, how to create some jobs, and about lobbying. And so the result was the space shuttle. And the space shuttle, I have it in my book in detail, was a total failure. Only a few numbers to prove it. when they planned it, the calculation for development costs was $5 billion, and then for every flight between $5 and $10 million. In the end, every flight cost between $1 and $1.5 billion. So it's a big contrast. And they had an estimate for 140 flights every year. 140 flights every year. In the end, it was 135 flights in 30 years. And then they had 2 accidents where 14 people, astronauts, were killed. And this was then the end of the space shuttle program in 2011. And then, the title, the chapter title there in my book is The End of the Future, because this was really something like the end of the future, because they had no space shuttle, but they were also not able to find a substitute, another rocket. They had nothing. So in 2011, the Americans were not able to bring their own American astronauts from American soil with American rockets to the International Space Station. They had to rely on old Russian Soyuz rockets. And of course, the Russians charged a lot. Every flight was some millions more expensive than the flight before because they had a monopoly. And the United States relied on them. And I think this is a big disaster for the United States. The United States, the country that won the space race with the first man on the moon against the Soviet Union. And then a few years later, the situation being not able to bring their own astronauts to the International Space Station. And then there were some smart people inside NASA, some of them. Most were skeptical against private enterprise, against the private rocket companies. But there were a few who said, okay, let's try with them. It was something, they called it like their Hail Mary move, from what you have in football sometimes. In most cases, it doesn't work out. Hail Mary move. Okay, if nothing works, we have not our own rockets. We rely totally on the Russians. So let's try it with these guys. But there was a smart woman inside NASA. She was responsible for the cooperation with SpaceX. And every week, someone came to her office and told her, I'm so sorry for you that you have to work with these crazy idiots. I'm so sorry. I don't want to be in your shoes. But she believed in it. And in the end, she was right, because 9 years later, 2020, again, from American soil with an American rocket, brought American astronauts to the International Space Station. But this time, it was the Falcon rocket from a private company. And this was the first time the heading of the chapter title is The Second Space Age, because at this moment in 2020 began the second space age, what I call space capitalism, because this rocket was not built in the way NASA told to anyone, but Musk created and built it in the way as he thought that it's correct. And what he did, and I think this is amazing, an amazing number. If you compare the launch costs, it means how much does it cost to bring 1 kilogram to space? If you compare the space shuttle on the one hand and his costs on the other hand, he reduced it by 95%. by 95%. And I explain in my book why he could make it so much cheaper than the government-led spaceflight.
And how could he make it so much cheaper?
At first, they had a crazy kind of contracts in the 60s and in the 70s, also the following years. Also in this time, NASA did not build their own rockets, but they were built by companies like Boeing or Rockwell. But they had a contract. Please show me your costs, and then you can add maybe 8 or 10% profit. This was the kind of cooperation, because the bureaucrats, they had fear that the companies could make too much profit. And so they thought it's a good idea, show me your cost, and then you can add something. But this was a crazy kind of cooperation, because what happened, for example, if you have 1 billion costs and you can add 10%, then you make 100 million profit. But if you have 3 billion costs and you can add 10%, you have 300 million profit. So, and what happened? The higher the cost, the higher the profit. It's always in the economy a question of the incentives. And of course, it became even more and more expensive. I spoke with someone who worked at this time in one of the leading space companies, and he said, our best product was our overhead, because more costs means more profit. This is a crazy kind of cooperation. And what Musk did, he changed the way to cooperate. First, he told them, I will not sell you a rocket, and I will build it the way someone tells me. I build it the way how I think it's the best way to build it. And I will not sell you any rocket, but I will sell you a service. Compare it with UPS or with FedEx. We deliver something from A to B, or like Musk said, I bring you a satellite in orbit, or I bring your astronauts to the International Space Station, and I charge you a fixed price for this. And then the money that he saves, the cost that he saves, makes his profit higher. It's very important always in the economy to understand what is the incentive. In the past, the incentive was increase the cost. It means increase your profit. And now the incentive was decrease your costs. It makes more profit. And what happened? He could decrease the cost, and he did it in a lot of ways. But one very important thing, he was the first one to build a truly reusable rocket, because all the rockets that are built till today from NASA, in China, in Europe, from Russia, these are all only rockets that you can use one time. You remember now, it's only a couple of months ago, this Artemis 2, the flyby to the moon, the rocket cost $4 billion, and it was only one-time use. And now I asked you something. Imagine I will come to the United States. I will go there in July, and the airplane could be only used one time and then waste. How much would I have to pay for a ticket? I don't know. $800,000 or $700,000? I don't know. Of course, it's expensive. You can use it only one time. But with Elon Musk's Falcon rocket, he used now the same rocket 34 times. And of course, it makes a huge difference whether you can use it one time or 34 times. But it's difficult to build such a rocket. They tried it before the government-led agencies. They tried everywhere in the world today. But the only one who was successful, Musk did it 10 years ago. 10 years ago, he built the first reusable rocket. And half year ago, Jeff Bezos, the second one, was also successful. But NASA couldn't do it. The Chinese, they can't do it. So they will do it later, of course. But so far, till today, no one else could do it. And you see, today, this is the really interesting story and the really interesting, fascinating number. If people ask me, space capitalism, this sounds like science fiction, when will it happen? And my answer is, it happens here and now. Because last year, there were 324 rocket launches worldwide from all countries, China, India, 324. But 165 out of them were SpaceX. So it means SpaceX had more rocket launches than all countries in the world together. And if SpaceX were a country, it would be number one, far ahead of China. And this is what changed. It's private today. And it's not only, I mentioned our SpaceX, of course, they are leading, but I have also some pages about another company. The name is Rocket Labs. It's founded by a New Zealander, Peter Beck. And he didn't study. He's a hands-on entrepreneur who built this company. He had last year 21 rocket launches. This is 3 times more than whole Europe with our space-led agency. This man alone from New Zealand, 3 times more than whole Europe. And I think everyone can see that private enterprise, as it is very often, is much superior to state-led enterprises.
You know, I'm going to back up here quite a ways because that kind of all rolled into a bunch of things there. You know, the cost plus of general contractors, and it sort of happens across the board. You know, the more that they charge, the more profit that they make, and Congress has never stopped it. And then the second thing you were saying that Musk said, we'll build the airplane and charge you a money to take the passengers from point A to point B, or to take the cargo from point A to point B, and all of that. And that's what allowed him to drive the costs down. You do have a really detailed story from beginning of how Elon got so interested in rockets, and how he was just a hippie guy from Silicon Valley that had started PayPal, and he went to a meeting in China, and he wasn't dressed up appropriately according to them, and they spit on, or Russia. He went to Russia, and he was appropriate of how to dress, and they spit on his shoes.
Yes, I have to tell the story because this is really interesting. So first, it starts. I have it in this biography about Elon Musk. He was sitting with his friends, a few friends. I think it was beside a swimming pool, and he just sold PayPal. You know, this was the first company he became rich, PayPal. And his friend asked him, "And what's next for you? What will you do next?" And he was in the end of his 20s now. And he said, "I think my task is to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization and to settle Mars." And his friend said, "You're totally banana, you're stupid." So, and then Musk started to Google, what are the NASA plans for Mars? And he found there's nothing at all. And then he Googled and he found a society that is called the Mars Society. And the founder is, I met him, Robert Zuprin. He's the founder. Definitely should have one day an interview with him. He wrote great books about the case for Mars. He dedicated all his life only to one idea, going to Mars. All his life. This is what this man does. Robert Zuprin, a great guy. I met him. And then Zuprin had a fundraising dinner. You had to pay $500 to take part. But Musk transferred 5,000 because this time people didn't know him and his name, and he wanted some awareness for him. So, okay, I spent, and it worked out for him. And then he met Suprin, and he asked him, I want to get involved something for the space and go to Mars. But the first step, of course, we need a rocket. Where to get this rocket? And Suprin told him, here in the United States, it's not possible, but the Russians, they sell rockets. Yes, but I don't know any Russian. Musk's answer. But Suprin gave him the name of someone, Robert Cantrell. He gave him his name. He has this contacts to Russia. You should meet him. And then Musk gave him immediately a call to Cantrell. At this time, he was in his car, and someone called him. He never knew he didn't know his name before. Here I'm Elon Musk, entrepreneur and millionaire, and I want to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization and go to Mars, and I want to buy rockets. And this Robert Cantrell thought, oh, I think there's someone crazy who called me. But at home, he Googled, is there someone with the name Elon Musk and a company called PayPal? Yes, it was. And then, to make a long story short, they met and went to Russia. And then exactly this happened, what you told. First, the advice from Robert Cantrell to Musk was dress in a different way. Not like this, Silicon Valley casual way, but take a suit and tie. And Musk, oh no, I don't care about it. But the Russians, they cared about it. And they saw him, this Silicon Valley dressed man, and they asked him, well, what do you want to do with this rocket? And his answer was, again, the same. I want to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization and go to Mars. And then it happened. They spot on his shoes and Cantrell, and he went back to the United States. And in the airplane, he had his lab troop. And then he said to his friends, we can build the rocket by ourselves. We don't need this Russians. We can build it. And the others, they thought, it's crazy. It's rocket science. It's not so easy to build a rocket. And if you see that this is the beginning, and then now, less than 30 years later, and I repeat this number, that from 324 flights, 165 were SpaceX, the company, and from 15,000 active satellites in orbit, 10,000 are Starlink satellites from Musk. And you think that it's less than 30 years ago that he sat there with his friends and they said, you're crazy. So I really admire what he did at this time. And I think this is only the beginning. And, we will have now this IPO from SpaceX. And I think will be the biggest IPO in history. He won a race $75 billion. And so far, the biggest IPO was 29 billion. So wow. I think it's an amazing story. And I think this is only the beginning. It's only starting right now.
Oh, that's so great. Well, hold on to that thought. There's two things that come to mind when you say that. Number one is, if you believe it, you can make it happen. And the second thing is always to think big. Elon's a big thinker. So we're going to take a quick break here for our sponsors from AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on the iHeartRadio network every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can also listen to them on the America Out Loud's media player. If you've missed any of these great conversations, you can find the Tenpenny Files on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, and on any of our platforms on X, Instagram, Rumble, and YouTube. You can also find them on my Substack, drtenpenny.substack.com, and also our main website, which is drtenpenny.com. We will be right back after you hear a great message from our sponsors. Listen closely. Support our sponsors because they support us. Sit tight. We will be right back with more with Dr. Rainer Zitelmann talking about his book, The New Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. We will be right back. My supplement line is called the Opti line, and we've been working with these formulations for many years and have years and years of documented success. Our best sellers are OptiMune, OptiVital Cleanse, and we've got a whole line of supplements that you can look at, the ones that I've hand selected and have used personally with my patients at Tenpenny Integrated Medical Center for almost 30 years. You can find out more by going to supplements.drtenpenny.com, and you get 10% off by using our code DRT10 for every day. But if you sign up for the monthly auto ship, if you're going to be on these supplements for an extended period of time, sign up for that, because then you get 15% off. That's supplements.drtenpenny.com. The Wave Watch is really a great frequency device that has over 1,100 settings for all sorts of things that may be bothering you, all kinds of conditions, problems with organs, with your brain, with activity, with pain. It really is a superior watch. It's not a wearable. It puts frequencies in you. It doesn't transmit frequencies or information out. You can use it for the whole family. We have great testimonials. Go to watch.drtenpenny.com today to get your Wave Watch. Well, welcome back, everyone. Today's conversation is with Dr. Rainer Zitelmann to talk about his most recent book, New Space Capitalism, The Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars, the book that makes it possible to understand the interplay between public and private spaceflight. Let me tell you just a little bit more about today's guest. Rainer Zitelmann studied history and political science and graduated with distinction. From 1987 to 1992, Rainer worked at the Central Institute for Social Science Research at the Free University of Berlin. He then became the editor-in-chief of a publishing house and headed various departments in a German daily newspaper. In 2016, Rainer Zitelmann was awarded a second doctorate, this time in sociology, with his thesis on the psychology of the super rich. He's a best-selling author of 31 books, which have been translated into more than 30 languages. Detailed information about the life of Rainer Zitelmann, which we will be sure to put in the show notes. Just his website could be a book in and of itself. And you can find more about that at rainer-zitelmann.com. Rainer, thank you so much for being in the show today and talking about these really incredible opportunities, particularly with Elon Musk. But you know, Elon wasn't the first to invest in private space travel. In fact, you talk about in your book a Robert Heinlein in 1949. And there's already a significant tradition, privately funded space research, which included privately funded observatories, and a very rich history that you talk about in your book. Tell us about the first privately funded research that goes all the way back to 1949. And then we'll get into talking about observatories.
Yes, I'm happy to do it. But before the break, you said something that I want to emphasize, or that I want to repeat what is very important. You spoke about how important it is to set yourself really big goals. And I think this is the foundation of the success of America. Is two things. It's first capitalism, but only capitalism is not enough. There are entrepreneurs and individuals who set themselves really big goals. And this is true for Elon Musk. And I don't know what you think about him, but I'm a big fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe not of everything with his political opinions, but the success story. Coming from Austria, from ordinary family, and then being the biggest bodybuilder in the world, and then being one of the best paid movie stars, and then 2 times governor of California. And I think these are the people with, I don't know whether you have this this movie on Netflix about Total Recall, about his life. Yes, and so I admire people like this, and I think they are the foundation, the really people we need. People like this who really think big. But I think there was no one who thought bigger than Elon Musk, because to make mankind a multiplanetary civilization and to settle Mars with 1 million people, I think this is even much more than being the best bodybuilder on the world. So, but now back to your question. You're right.
I agree. Totally agree.
Yes, there is a tradition from private funded space research. What a lot of people don't know, but there were a lot of these observatories in the United States, and from in the last century, from 34, I think only 2 or 3 were financed by the government, and the others were like Guggenheim Foundation, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and this was, of course, another kind of. They had no rockets at this time, but the goal was similar, and it was with private money, and also the pioneer Goddard, Robert Goddard, the pioneer, American pioneer for space travel. He got money from the military, but more money he got from private foundations. And I had the honor a few months ago to write the article in the opinion op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about him, because this was 100 years ago that the first rocket with liquid fuel that he brought it to space, or not to space, but that he started the first rocket with liquid fuel. And he was also private funded. And you mentioned this science fiction story. This is a great story from Robert Heinlein, published in 1950, The Man Who Sold the Moon. And this is an amazing story, because I think later we will talk about it. This will happen in the future. And you see, a lot of things that sounds like science fiction, later they became reality. Another science fiction author, very famous, Arthur Clarke, he wrote in 1977 that satellites will change a lot, that satellites will be as important as the telephone at his time. And today it's reality. Without satellites, we could do nothing. We could do our call now. Nothing would work, even not the traffic lights, and no Uber and no weather forecast. We rely totally today on satellites. And this is what the science fiction author Clarke saw in 1977. And Robert Heinlein even saw it in 1950, that the future of space and on the moon is, in a way, a real estate story. The Man Who Sold the Moon. It was not a government-financed flight to the moon. It was private funded. And so sometimes these science fiction authors, they see things where ordinary people think it's impossible. But I think it's a mistake if you say it too fast, something being impossible. Only another story there, by the way, it's in this context. In 1903, there was a first, a professor tried to start an airplane, but it was a failure. And the New York Times had an article about it some days later. Oh, this will happen maybe with an airplane between 1 million and 10 million years. It will become reality.
Wow.
This is what has the New York Times. So, and do you know how long it took after this failure? Another one, the Wright brothers, they started 2 months later, their first airplane. And the New York Times had the prediction, oh, don't believe in it. It can be in 1 million or 10 million years. So sometimes things are much closer than people think. And I think this is also with the topics we are talking about today.
Talk a little bit about, you mentioned that during particularly the early 1900s, all the wealthy families invested in or privately owned an observatory. because they were just fascinated by the stars, and that there were several hundred across the United States, and only 2 of them were government owned. I think you said one was owned by the Navy, and I don't remember who the other one was by, but that the observatories really were another thing that was privately funded in the early years of the space exploration. It came through the observatories.
Yes, absolutely. This is true. Yes, it was prestige for these entrepreneurs. I'm part of this. I had a number in Boston. From the 40 richest people in Boston, 19 were involved in this giving money for this observatory. So it was really popular with rich people to spend money for this. And so why is this important? Because sometimes we think it was all times government-led, because we know it from the 70s with the Apollo program, with the first moon landing. And we think that people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson, this is a totally new phenomenon. But it is not. This is what I show. No, there's a tradition. There's a long tradition from private financing of this. And I think it's important to understand it.
Yeah, very important. And you write it, there's a long section about it. A lot of people that you catalog in there that were part of that early exploration and of outer space. And you said that entrepreneurs will get behind space as an investment, especially a real estate investment, if that was an opportunity. But what would space land purchases look like? And what would land initially be used for in terms of that? And, there's a lot of laws that kind of prohibit this that go way, way back. And you catalog all of those really very carefully about the different laws that prohibit mining of asteroids and settling on the moon and settling in Mars. And because these are God's created beings, and why should we be able to harvest them? And I think was it Jeff Bezos that was talking at a conference, and somebody said, "How dare you rape that rock?"
Yes, this was like a woke student, and I quoted some books. There's a professor, usually she does gender studies and nonsense like this, and she wrote a book, Astrotopia, and she said we are not allowed to conquer Mars because the Mars belongs to microbes, if there are any. We don't know exactly today, but because we don't know, she said, even the rocks have their own right, and we shouldn't disturb the rocks, because the rocks, they have their own right, and men are not allowed to. It sounds crazy, but as historians, I know there's not an idea that is so crazy that not one day crazy people come around and try to implement it. But yes, let's talk about private property, because this is, I think, the really the heart and the most important thing is chapter 10 in my book about private property. Let's start with this. My question was, we were successful going to the moon in 1969, and then 5 more times. The last time was in 1972. And now it's 54 years ago and nothing happened again. Only this flyby, they were very proud, and they said, oh, we were 6,000 kilometers faster than before. Yeah, but you didn't land it there. This is what they did in 1969. So this is, if you imagine what progress we had in the meantime with the internet and with the smartphones, and that we are naturally not able to do what we did in 1969. You have to find an explanation for this. And I think it's not so hard to understand it. People will not do anything without a powerful reason, a powerful motive. And the motive in the 60s was the first space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. Johnson said it at this time, President Johnson. who is first in space is first everywhere, and who's second in space is second everywhere. So we have to win it. And they spent all it, 400,000 people were involved, 20,000 companies, almost 5% of the budget of the United States were. So you can't do it for a long time. It was like a wartime mobilization. But then in the moment when they had, when they left, or when they planted the flag of the United States on the moon, the wind was out of the sails. At this moment, the wind was out of the sails. There was no reason. And I think we need reason. Money makes the world go round. This is also true for the universe. You have to find how to finance it. You cannot finance it all with taxpayers' money. Maybe yes, to bring some astronauts to the moon or Mars, but not his plans from Elon Musk, for example, to settle there. His plan is to settle 1 million people on Mars or to build a city on the moon. It's impossible to finance it by the government. So, but how to finance it? And my idea is real estate, because I asked the question, who should have the right to own land on the Mars or on the moon? And there's a treaty. This is the Outer Space Treaty from 1967. And according to Article 2 of this treaty, nations, states are prohibited to claim ownership over celestial bodies or land on celestial bodies. It's prohibited. And I have no problem with this when it's prohibited for states. Maybe it's not so bad if states are not. But how is it with private persons? How is it with companies? There's nothing in the Outer Space Treaty. And I think the reason why there's nothing in it, because at this time in the 60s, no one could imagine that someday there will be entrepreneurs, multi-billionaires like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos who are able, without the government, to go there to the stars. And so there's nothing in this Outer Space Treaty. And there was a dispute, different opinions amongst legal scholars. One say what is forbidden for nations is also forbidden for private companies, and the others, they say, no, it's nothing there that it's forbidden, and what is not forbidden in the first place, it's allowed, and it's allowed. So it's a dispute. But so now the question, what I think, my idea, what should be fair? Who should own land on Mars, for example, or on asteroids? I not, you not, because we are not able to bring a rocket there. We don't have the money, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the risk. Why should we own something there? I think, I'm a historian, and I find my answers always in history. How was it in the history of America? How took the people land there? These were the people you called the squatters there at this time. They claimed the land. Only later it was legalized with this Homestead Act from 1862. But in the first place, they came there and they took the land. And of course, there were these indigenous people, and you can discuss about it, whether it was right or not. But this problem is not on Mars or on Moon, because there are no other people. It belongs to no one. And so I think those should have the right to take it, who are able to go there, who are willing to take the risk, who have the knowledge to go there and to spend the money. And then what to do with it. For example, if SpaceX were able to go to Mars, starts to build there, or to develop something, to build there a small city. And then I think they should claim ownership, of course, not of the whole planet, but a manageable area, maybe the size of Singapore. The area of Mars is 200,000 times the size of Singapore. There's enough place for others. Or maybe you can take a smaller one, like the size of Manhattan, whatever. And then, this is my idea, to bring it to the stock exchange. Bring Mars to the stock exchange. So
Wow.
that everyone can be an owner. You and me, everyone who buys shares. And this is a way to finance it. And what I don't understand, I read this 400 pages of the SpaceX prospectus now for the IPO. And there is something about Mars and asteroid mining, but only, and space truth, but a few sentences, only very few sentences, maybe half page from 400 pages. And the criticism was now from some people who thought that they were very smart. Oh, Musk, he can earn so much with Starlink, but in the end, he will not give it to the shareholders. He will waste it all for his science fiction Mars projects. But why is this criticism? Because he did not explain, he had no idea there how to earn money. And unfortunately,
well, you know what, Rainer, this is so interesting, and we've got so much more to cover. Would you be willing to come back and do another session on for the rest of this book? We will because we have to close this out today for their timing, and I'm gonna have you come back, and we'll do another session because I have a whole list of questions I want to talk about. Asteroid.
Sorry, I talked too long. I know I talked too long. I'm so fascinated about it. Yes,
I know.
Sorry.
Asteroid mining and space travel and space tourism and all of these different things. So could you come back again tomorrow so we can do part 2?
Absolutely. And also we can talk. I have to show you.
Wait, we got to stop. So our sponsors are going to shut us off, and I want everything that you say to be recorded. So we're going to have to do a fast closeout here today, everybody. Thank you so much for everybody being here with us today. As you can tell, there's a lot more to say about this topic. So we are going to continue this as part 2 tomorrow with our guest and about his book. We're going to talk to Rainer Zitelmann about his book, New Space Capitalism and the Entrepreneurial Path to the Stars. So we're going to close out for today. We'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody. Goodbye and God bless.